Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday message for June 4th of 2023. Today we are beginning a 6-week series on the book Lessons in Truth. In 1892, H. Emily Cady began a series of articles for Unity magazine, one each month, on basic metaphysical teachings, aspects of which Charles Fillmore called truth. In 1903, those monthly writings became a book titled Lessons in Truth, and is actually considered to be the core book on expressing and explaining the philosophy of unity teachings. Emily Cady's opening statement in the book is this: "You may study with human teachers and from man-made books until doomsday. You may get all the theological lore of the ages. You may understand intellectually all the statements of truth and be able to prate healing formulas as glibly as oil flows. But until there is a definite inner revealing of the reality of an indwelling Christ, through whom and by whom all life, health, peace, power, all things, who is all things, you have not yet found the friendship of the Lord." You know, the majority of people on this planet Earth at this time still believe the old adage, what you see is what you get. If you get cancer, you have to die. If you get a cold, it's going to take 10 days to get over it. If you break a leg, that's going to be 6 to 8 weeks to heal. There are also internal beliefs that down here on this earth, there has to be sickness, sorrow, poverty, war, etc. And yes, those things are going on around us, and no one can deny that. And yet, Exodus chapter 3, verse 7 to 8 states, "I am come down to deliver you out of this suffering and to bring you up into a good land and a large, and to a land flowing with good things." Luke chapter 15, verse 18 states, "Having tired of eating husks, he will get up and go to my Father." You know, there comes a time for all of us where we just stop looking around ourselves, seeing everything about what's wrong out there in our life and what's wrong with life on earth. And we come to a thought that says, there has to be more than this. There has to be a way out of this. How do I get out of the situation that I am in? And whether that's an illness or a financial situation, a relationship, or whatever, we're not talking about doing things necessarily from an earth plane standpoint, although that may be part of it. What we're talking about in these next several sessions is to understand that we have a state of consciousness that can be changed with a thought. And it is at that state of consciousness that determines where we are taking our lives. Change your state of consciousness and your life changes. The number one thing to remember is that we are energy beings, not totally physical. And every thought we think puts energy out to the universe. And that energy we put out is what our state of consciousness is. Now, metaphysical teachings for eons of times have stated that we have conscious dominion over all things that go on in our life. And it's time for us to truly own that in our own lives. When that happens, as Emily Cady states, somewhere on this journey, the human consciousness or intellect comes to a place where it gladly bows to its spiritual self and confesses that to the spiritual self, it's Christ is highest and is Lord. At that point, there becomes a sense of freedom from the world around you. And we have to understand that this is not an instantaneous instantaneous event that happens for the majority of people. This is something that happens over time, but something I once heard was this: if your life depended on it, how much effort would you put into it? If you were drowning, how much effort would you put into rising to the surface of the water? So the question is, how greatly do you want to change your life? It's a question I ask myself every single day, and sometimes many times a day. When I get sidetracked doing one thing or another, we think we can find happiness and joy from the outside things. Yet in actuality, happiness and joy is an inside thing. If you live alone like I do, there's a tendency to become depressed, sad, not caring. And yet within each and every one of us is this beautiful life force energy that just says, what do you want? And we call it up from the depths of our own being. We've heard many, many times about the attitude of gratitude. And a few days ago, I was reading an article about some of the greatest movers and shakers on our planet today, and how do they stay so positive. One of them stated that before he gets up in the morning, even if he doesn't feel this way, he states, I am so grateful to be alive. It's another day that I have a chance to share love, to share light, to share oneness. I get up, and when my feet touch the rug, I feel so grateful for my rug. I look around and I'm grateful for my bed. I feel gratitude for my clothes. I feel gratitude for my shower, my refrigerator, my pots and pans, my coffee maker. And he said he spends at least 10 minutes just looking around his place and just feeling and speaking the gratitude he feels for different items, health aspects, whatever it is. And he states that his whole being shifts in that 10 minutes. Emily Cady wrote, do you stop to think, really to comprehend what it means to be heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ? Romans chapter 8, verse 17. It means that every man, as Emerson says, is the inlet and may become the outlet of all there is in God. We are his heirs if we only know how to claim our inheritance. Galatians chapter 4, 1-7 reads, and because you are children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into your hearts. So you are no longer a slave, but a child. And if the child, then also an heir through God. Galatians chapter 4, verse 4 says, it is God's fullness of time for you to arise and begin to claim your inheritance. You are now free to have dominion over all these things, material, and to no longer be bound by all the events of the earth. John 15, chapter 15, verse 16 states, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit. To go forth and bear fruit, that means it's time for us to know our dominion over this earth and to express it in our lives. Once we begin to truly understand that we do not have to live the life we are living right now, but that we can change it, we really begin to look at every thought, every word, every action we take, because each of those, as Katie wrote, is bound by immutable laws, be fraught with good results. But remember what Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things shall be added unto you. So seeking first the kingdom of God is actually telling us to be a more conscious contact with Source. In other words, daily meditation. Katie wrote, every man must take time daily for quiet in meditation. In daily meditation lies the secret of power. No one can grow in either spiritual knowledge or power without it. Daily meditation alone with God focuses the divine presence within us and brings it to our consciousness. So when you take time apart from everything that's going on around you, to have this time in meditation, this is the time to get all your thoughts centered on God and on your relationship to Source itself. Just let everything else go. And as Katie writes, think of some truth statement. The ever wonderful aspects of God. And it can be just a simple statement. Katie explains that the real reason to do meditation is not only just to withdraw from all the physical aspects of the things around us, but we get apart from everything to become really still so that the presence and power of God can flow into us and that a whole new way of living can become apparent to us. We get new inspirations, new thoughts, and actually new supplies starts to flow in. And the more we do this, just sitting in the presence of God, the presence of Source, just sitting in the presence actually changes our energetic field, our state of consciousness. And since like attracts like, we begin to attract more of those things that match with the state of consciousness that we are becoming. We have to remember that God is in everything that's going on around us. Yet, since we have been given dominion over our life and affairs, it's our thoughts and our feelings that we're putting out into the world, into the universe, that is using that energy of the God Source to create the life around us. And one of the things that Katie brings up is that we don't always have to do anything on the outer plane to actually change it. The presence and power of God is inside of us, as us, moving through us. So as we change our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, our state of consciousness, as we move more into gratitude, as we think more and more about God, about the Christ, as we put more and more of our attention on Source, in those times in meditation, the new energy that we're putting out begins to create a new life for us. And now you may be moved to take an action of some sort, but that action comes from God. And as we attune ourselves more and more often to that God Source, to the Christ within us, we know when we have to make changes, and we know when we are to sit back and allow Source to do the changing for us. Katie writes about negative circumstances in our lives, and she writes this: the very circumstances in your life that seem heartbreaking will turn to joy before your very eyes if you will steadfastly refuse to see anything but God in them. Psalm 23, verse 1 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." So when we have a real inner consciousness of that statement, and that statement alone, as Katie writes, will supply all wants more surely and far more liberally than can any human hand. I think the greatest thing and the most absolute ultimate aim of every human being on this earth is to come to and into the consciousness that God's Source is inside of us, as us, living through us, and allow that God Source that is always in us, is all power, to come forth into every person's life. Katie wrote, this is to take place in the silence of your own being first, and then allowed that new consciousness of the consciousness that Christ does dwell in you, then becomes that which goes before you to make all things right. You know, I have spoken in the past about the words I am. The I am means the presence of God, the presence of Christ in you and as you. In John 14, verse 6, when he writes that Jesus said, I am the way and the truth of the life, he should have probably written it as the I am is the way, the truth, and the life. It's your I am presence, the presence of the Christ in you as you, which is your way out of the pulls and the ties of this earth plane. And that is what gives you dominion over the earth and frees you from the effects of an old way of consciousness that you're living in your life right now. One of the things that comes up many times is that we are to worship God. The challenge with that statement is that for many of us, we still have this old picture of God up on the throne. So when we say we are to worship God, we have this picture of God sitting on the throne with his staff in one hand, his flowing white hair flowing around us, looking at us, going, okay, worship me. Which now actually makes me laugh. However, in John 4:24, it says that Jesus told the Samaritan woman at the well, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. So even there, it's pointing out that God is not a being in human form. When we say God is spirit, we're talking about the creative energy that is the cause of all visible things. God is spirit, the creative energy and intelligence underlying all physical things, not a being or a person having life, intelligence, love, or power. God is the life, intelligence, love, and power. God is life itself. God is prosperity itself. God is health itself. When we are meditating and we are sitting in the energy of the presence of God, we are actually sitting in the presence of perfect love, all the wisdom, intelligence of the universe, health itself. And as we do this, we are actually absorbing into the cellular structure of these bodies that perfect love, that perfect wisdom, that perfect health. We don't have to direct any of this because as we just sit in the energy of source, the perfection of all things, all life gets absorbed into our cellular structure. And with that, our bodies change to greater health. Our minds change to greater wisdom and intelligence. Our souls open to giving and receiving greater love. And we begin to understand what true power is. We begin to understand that the real power, that is God, is what is coming through us, changing our lives. God is the source of our existence, every moment of every day. God is just omnipotent, which means all powerful. God is omnipotence itself, which is all power. God is not just omniscience, which is all knowing. God is omniscience itself, which is all knowledge. God is not just omnipresent in individual things, but God is more. God is omnipresence, the presence of all things. So God is not a being having qualities. God is the good itself. So everything that you can think of that is good, when it's in its absolute perfection, is what that being we call God is. So God then is the thing that stands under every visible form of life, love, intelligence, or power. Every rock, tree, animal, every visible thing is a manifestation of the one source God. There's an old saying that says, if you take a cup of water out of the ocean, you have all the ocean itself. So each individual manifestation of God actually contains the whole of God. It's just coming out in different qualities or degrees. That cup of water from the ocean still has every single quality of the ocean in it. We, as individuals, come from God. So we have every single aspect of God inside of us. We just don't understand it or how to use it, or at least we haven't until now. There's a lot of us who have been on this path for decades who are more and more understanding the real deep truth of that statement. You know, we're finding out that as we step back from everything going on in life and just feel into that statement of the spirit of the Christ, the spirit of source in us, we are really beginning to understand that we have seen our lives change. We have seen events that were so terrible that we couldn't figure out any way to get around them or through them or heal them or whatever. But just moving into that space of touching into the Christ within and holding it, it begins to shift and change and work itself out. And that is the key. It's not just going in and connecting to this source and then coming out. It's going in, connecting to it, and then holding ourselves in that space. That work is then done in our state of consciousness, our energy field, our divine presence in around us and through us. And as that field and presence is transformed and transmuted into a higher level of state of consciousness, many times we don't have to do anything. And it is as if the sea parts before us. All things are handled in the highest and best way for all. Emily Cady wrote that man is the last and highest manifestation of divine energy, the fullest and most complete expression. And it says, to man, therefore, is given dominion over all other manifestations. Spirit, our innermost real being, the absolute part of us, the I of us, has never changed. Though our thoughts and our circumstances may have changed hundreds of times, if not thousands of times. This is the part of us that, as Cady states, is a standing forth of God into visibility. It's an expression of the source of all that is in us. And this is where in John chapter 10, verse 30, it says that Jesus said, the Father and I are one. And this is what he meant, that part of God that God created can never exist apart from God itself. Then we have our mortal mind, which is the region of the intellect and where we do our conscious thinking. But this is also the part of us where it's the way and the key for our dominion over the planet. Of course, our body is the external part of us, of our being, that we can constantly and continually change just by how our thoughts keep growing and growing and growing more to a consciousness of oneness with God's source. And just remember that when we say the word of God, we are actually just putting a name to an energy that's unchangeable principle and something that is at the source of all existence. In an individual consciousness, God seems to take on a personality, but in truth, God is just the creative underlying force behind all things. We could actually call God it rather than he, because he gives it a more personal persona and energy, whereas with it being pure energy would actually be a better preference to what God actually is. There's only one source of being, and this source is the living foundation of all good, be it life, love, wisdom, power, prosperity, health, whatever. It's the giver of all good gifts. This source and you are connected every moment of your entire existence. And so therefore you have the power within you to draw on this source of all the good that you are or will ever be capable of actually desiring. We have direct access to that source, and that direct access is through meditation, a time of stepping aside from everything around you, be it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And there will come a time when you're sitting in that meditative state and you feel the presence and the power of source itself within you. You recognize that any health challenges that you have will be dissolved in the presence and power. Any challenges that you have in life will be dissolved in this presence and power within you. Anything your heart desires will come to be when you sit and have this presence and power alive in you. We just have to take the time to sit in it more and more often every day. When I shared the story of the life of Myrtle Fillmore with you, one of the things I shared was how she would take herself apart from the entire world and sit for hours every day, just affirming the words that she heard from Dr. E.B. Weeks. I am a child of God and I do not inherit sickness. She would repeat those words over and over again for hours on end. She would affirm that God is her source, that she is a child of that source, and therefore she inherits only the good that God is. She sat for hours every day, just in the presence and power of God. And I shared with you in the statement earlier in the talk, what would you do if your life depended on it? You see, Myrtle's life depended on her spending that time sitting in the presence and power of God. She'd been given only a few short time to live and she was told to make her funeral arrangements. It took her 2 years, but in that time, she was completely free of tuberculosis and all the effects of malaria. She had a health radiating from her body that she had never had in her whole entire life. She knew that the presence and power of God could do. So my question to you is, do you want to change your life? Do you want your life to truly, truly be different from what it is now? What if your life depended upon it changing? And this is not to go into fear or anxiety or, oh my God, now I have to do this or that. This is about just truly asking yourself how greatly, how badly, how greatly do you truly want your life to change? Because if you truly want your life to change, it's actually very simple. Just spend more and more time sitting in the presence and power of God. Turn off the TV, put away the books, let go of everything you have to do. The dishes can wait, the vacuuming can wait, the lawn cutting can wait. Because without the presence and power of God working in your life the way you want it to work, none of that matters. And I'm not saying it doesn't need to be done. What I'm saying is take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, just sit in the presence of and power of God and allow that presence, that power to move through you to do all those things. And the thing is that even greater things can be done with you. One of the things that makes it even simpler today than when Myrtle Fillmore was doing it is that we know the words I am. We know that when we say I am just represents the fullness of the Christ in you, the fullness of source in you. So we could just sit and just say, I am. And just those two words alone means I am now the fullness of all that God is, the fullness of health, the fullness of prosperity, the fullness of joy, the fullness of peace, the fullness of whatever it is that you desire. So just making the statement of the words I am puts you completely 100% into the presence and power of God. And you don't have to say anything else. Just I am. So as you sit the next time in a quiet place, in a quiet time, just breathe in I and breathe out am. I am. I am. I am. And set in that energy. Thank you so much for being here for this first of 6 messages about the great book, Lessons in Truth. Thank you all. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Namaste. God bless you all.